So throughout the life of a project, a lot of people say that the most important communication is between the actual constructors, and the construction managers, and the actual architects or the design team. Would you agree with this? How important is that key aspect of communication?
Well, I think that we can communicate to the end of the world arguing, and I think there won't be a question in anybody's mind that during a discussion everybody said their piece. So I think communication alone takes a second place as to sticking to a clear message of attitudes and understanding. So you can say many words and not reach an understanding because you don't know where the other person is coming from, or you don't understand where the other person is coming from, or you have your own agenda. I would say that the hardest thing for me, the first obstacle for me to communicate with anybody in the team is if I face certain, if I sense certain resistance in the attitude of collaboration, if I sense that there's no trust in the expertise of the team, if there's no, if there's certain, I don't know, an appearance of mistrust or an appearance in which I could be singled out, or I could be singled out or ignored. I face this differently, and on one hand, in our industry, I face this as a woman, in which my expertise early on in my career, not only because I was young, but also because I was a woman, I was not really given the proper credit for my expertise. I also face it as a Latina woman because a Hispanic woman with her own accent and her own way of doing her nonverbal communication can become an obstacle for other people to understand that behind all these hand gestures I am really competent and I'm able to explain or describe a situation. It could at times culturally it was distracting. So I had to overcome and understand, as opposed to get upset because I wasn't achieving the ideal level of a communication with a client or with a consultant or with a contractor or even with my peers and my bosses. I had to overcome this insecurity and say, well, how can I be more effective with my communication, given the fact of who I am, how I look, how I come across, and also the skills that I needed, the skill sets that I needed to develop in order to become a better manager. So in that sense, there have been many different aspects in which I would say breakdown of communication happens outside of just the message or what you are hearing at a meeting. There are many non-verbal and other activities happening that could influence the outcome of this communication. I would say to be sensitive and aware, not hypersensitive, but being aware of it and acknowledging it early on. It's the best way to disarm what could otherwise lead to a contentious situation. So at times to restate what the other person is saying, it helps. Like, so let me hear you. What I hear that you're saying is, and you give the opportunity for the other person to find a better way to explain themselves. It has always been the best way to say, yes, communication is important, but it's really the method in which you communicate and how you develop, how you deliver this communication. It's really what I think counts the most.
Architects and CMs come from very different sides of the building process. The architect works on the design factor while the CM works on the practical aspects of the job. These aspects include budget, scheduling, and the structure overall. A lot of the time, the architect and CMs don't see eye to eye on everything because of this way of thinking.
Depending on the project, I found that some of the most lenient situations happen when the issue originated from the CM side because it was well thought out from a cost perspective, a scheduling perspective, and a constructability perspective. So I would give a point for the CM, the construction management side, to anticipate and approach a solution. At times the solution was not well received because of aesthetics or because of it will threaten the vision of what the final project would be. And I think that because, again, it's a meeting of minds with very competent people, we were able to work as best as possible these approaches. The hardest ones have always been when the design decisions are imposed by probably not people with not the same type of expertise. in particular, if it's a design decision in post because it was early on presented on a project rendering, when when people were looking for investors, they had a particular feature in the design that everybody fell in love with. Yet when it came time to accommodating the program and accommodating the actual, the building requirements in the structure, that particular piece it had no room in it, it had room, but it created a plethora, a domino effect of problems down the line. Those were a lot more challenging because then you were tampering with the expectations and the vision of the project. I think us as a construction team, the designer in the construction management team, the contractor, we were all frustrated for the remainder, for the rest of the life of the project, because we were going against the grain of what could have worked best in that particular project. So in an instant, just because the design couldn't be altered and it could be a change of orientation of a particular piece of equipment, it created a whole can of worms when it came to accommodating this condition. And this was done very early on before, I would say before 100% CDs. We were warned by the engineers, we were warned by the construction managers, this is not a good decision, but the owner stuck by their intent of keeping the exterior appearance. This created a tension that we all knew that originated from that single moment, yet at that point I think everybody became adversarial as to who's going to cover their backs when this all hits the fan. And my apologies for the expression. Now everybody became defensive as to ultimately who will bear the responsibility of failure or unfortunate miscoordination due to this early on design decision. I think at the end of the day we all punch our way through it, over documented our decisions from then on, just to make sure that the responsibility and the accountability of each decision was well placed. And I think at the end we all learned incredibly that we were going to make it work. We were going to make the building happen. But the taste in our mouths wasn't that as nice as other projects in which we accommodated the constructability aspects better. So I think you learn from both experiences. You learn the most, and the motivation to do a building that is running with all these clinks and clanks of discussions and miscoordinations and discrepancies. It's tough to be motivated to come to work and do your job. But at the same time, you keep the eye on the goal and you get it done. All right?